Hi, this is in response to our Windows 10 discussion forum changes. There are many excellent points introduced in the discussion forum, and some I'd like to discuss a little bit more. First, there is a cost for an upgrade, even a free upgrade. So while Microsoft makes this update available for free for most consumers and even for consumers who might have pirated versions of the software, the true beneficiary of this update is for Microsoft. Microsoft has long had a tradition of supporting old operating systems, and in fact, the most used operating system in the world today is still Windows XP. If you combine XP and Windows 7 users, Microsoft finds itself in a very untenable situation. How do we support old operating systems that might not be compatible with new features or hardware and technology requirements? Businesses tend to be reluctant to upgrade OSs as well because they have an entire infrastructure predicated on a specific flavor of OS. And when one upgrades an OS, there's no guarantee that hardware will be compatible. The hardware fixes are relatively easy. Basically all you got to do is spend more money, update the hardware. The real problem is updating as necessary business operations and custom applications. So unless there's extensive testing, there's no guarantee that a Windows 10 update will be compatible with internal business practices or internally developed software, even something as simple as internally developed macros for Microsoft Office Suite. So then that in turn leads you to the question of who should be upgraded first. Some people would recommend that the tech staff be updated first because they're the ones that support the end user. And I tend to agree with that perspective. In fact, the tech groups and IT operations will be the ones who extensively test the OS to make sure there aren't any gross incompatibility issues with hardware, software, or business applications. In general, I tend to be reluctant to be an early adopter of new operating systems in most cases. There are some instances in which it's advantageous from a technology and marketing perspective to quickly seize upon a new development, but in general I'd rather let the early adopters be the ones that discover basic problems either with installation, deployment, or incompatibilities. But you can't wait too long, and if you wait too long, you become significantly out of alignment with the OS manufacturer, and that in turn makes support and future updates even more problematic. You have to decide whether, if you're going to update to Windows 10 in the near future, you need to decide, are you going to upgrade the OS in place, or are you going to do a clean software install? A lot of times organizations will look at upgrading an OS in place, updating an already installed operating system, as being easier and more cost effective. Problem is, there's no guarantee that the existing OS will function appropriately in an updated version, and all OSs over time accrete various different problems in their configurations. So long term, it really tends to be much more effective to do a basic clean installation and then reinstall applications and repoint to data stores as the implementation goes forward. This obviously, though, takes a lot more time. We're really in a new paradigm with Microsoft. Microsoft's strategy seems to be in favor of much smaller, more incremental change. This is something Mozilla has been doing with their Firefox browser. This is something Google does with their Chromium and Chrome operating system. Basically, when new patches and develops and features are available, they're pushed out immediately to the users. This tends to lend itself to a more smoother, less punctuated upgrade experience. There doesn't tend to be many drastic changes in user interface or functionality, but there is also no guarantee that these incremental changes will remain compatible with existing and prior operating system features of applications and hardware. Microsoft is in a difficult situation, as I said before. How long are they obligated to support an old operating system? Similarly, a business needs to ask themselves how long will they support legacy applications and operations in favor of moving towards a more modern OS and a more modern computing environment. The issue of social capital was mentioned by many of you as well. If consumers are using the latest and greatest and they go to work and they're finding that they're still using a win10, or excuse me, a win7, or maybe even, God forbid, a Windows XP environment, there will be some questions over the efficacy of the technology that they use professionally. So it is generally a good thing to have rough alignment with consumer use and business expectations, but you can't totally shape your workplace environment based on users' personal needs associated with hardware and software. That's one of the problems that Apple has with their OS. It's designed for individual users. It's software designed primarily by a company that makes hardware and who is encouraging the consumption of content. And it doesn't necessarily play nice in a corporate environment. Microsoft doesn't do as well with hardware. They only just started getting into the hardware business. They also tend to value the collective goals of an enterprise versus the individual desires of specific users. So you got to deal with that. I think the Windows 10 initiative really is designed to address the tremendous user anxiety over Windows 8, which offered an entirely different operating system. It was so different that many users found it difficult to transition to the new visual and functional metaphors of Windows 8. So Microsoft had to figure out some way of getting users on a current OS and reclaiming the comfort that users had that goes all the way back to Windows XP, at least in terms of how they interact with the technology. And going to an incremental scheduled approach of rolling updates, they can gradually evolve the interface over time. But doing so in one big fall swoop really created a tremendous amount of problems for users as well as the environment. Businesses need to assess the benefits and risks of maintaining their current OS environment. They have to figure out how they're going to support the new OS and how are they going to continue supporting of old legacy operating systems and applications, and come up with a timeline that will enable users to be on congruent systems. There's also a big issue of background data collection, and obviously enterprises can turn off most background data collections associated with an operating system, whether it's Apple or Microsoft, but there's still going to be an issue of trust that Microsoft or Apple isn't engaged in secret poaching of material. And that issue of trust becomes really important in terms of long-term commitment to a technology platform. I think that the class did a great job with this conversation. You all touched upon very important and relevant issues. You showed good considered analysis and looking at some of the problems of introducing an OS into an enterprise environment, as well as suggesting possible options for redeployment. And obviously we could talk much more about this. I think you got a good handle on some of the concerns associated with large-scale technology change in the workplace, whether it's software or whether it's hardware, and looking at long-term gain, aligning long-term gain with ultimately with enterprise goals is critical. And sometimes it's appropriate to accept some short-term difficulties if it's going to better enable the organization, better enable the enterprise to reach its goals and to service its needs. Great work, you guys.